Hey, this is Nate Wells.
And this is Drew Cove.
Check out our podcast, that Go for Hockey podcast, for the latest news and updates on University of Minnesota hockey. You can find us on iTunes, and we're also on the Zone Coverage Podcast Network.
That's elite.
The Zone Coverage Podcast Network.
They may be drinkers, Robin, but they're also human beings.
Hell yeah, let's get Stinko.
Podcast. I am Giles Farrell. Over across the internet from me somewhere is Ben Remington.
Hello.
Ben, we were supposed to be, or I should say, I was supposed to be in studio with you today, but I'm battling a little bit of a illness myself here today, so I am phoning in from the Egan Studios while you are in the Zone Coverage Studio. Did you find the closet under the stairs studio again?
I did, and my Derek Williams jersey is still here.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. Tis the season to be merry, and also tis the season to get horribly sick. So
probably stay away from that girlfriend of yours.
Yeah, I didn't want to bring you down with me, so you you should be thankful that I didn't give you whatever the hell this is.
I don't know. I was thinking about it this morning. I don't mind being sick. I'm sick so infrequently that for me it's like a nice opportunity to binge watch things and actually get some sleep for once.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. Like I do enjoy just the loafing on the couch that I never get to do when I'm sick, but I also just hate that sick feeling that comes along with it. So I'm perfectly fine with just being, regular normal Giles, which is nothing special to brag about anyway, but
Well, except for the phlegm, I don't know. Except for the phlegm, I think getting sick is great, but I could be in the minority on that.
Well, yeah, I have a little bit of that phlegm, which is less than ideal this time of year. So if you hear me cough or try to clear my throat, I apologize in advance. But
as long as you don't yawn.
Yeah, that's why I'm relieved you're in studio today and I'm not.
I'm awake.
We'll keep the yawning to a minimal, and hey, we have a producer with us today to help our audio levels and not pick up erroneous background noises and or conversation. So that should be quite wonderful as well. But on to less than ideal subjects like the Minnesota Wild. Ben, do you? I don't know. Before we roll in, do you have any overwhelming thoughts before we dive into the topics du jour?
Not really. It was just one of those weeks, 3 losses and I don't know. There's a myriad of things that you can think about all of any one of those losses. Some were better than others, but I don't know. I don't think it's panic button time by any stretch. It's just kind of the ebb and flow of this season. So any kind of negativity that we talk about today with how this team is playing, I think should also be factored into how positively we talked about this team not that long ago. So it kind of is what it is. Again, it's the ebb and flow of the season. So I'm not anywhere close to freak out mode.
Oh, come on. Just freak out. Just for me. Grant Dying Man his last request.
We got plenty of stuff to freak. We got plenty of stuff to freak out about.
I'm not actually dying, but it feels like it.
We got plenty of stuff to freak out about at the end of the show today, Giles.
Okay. Yeah. We've got a lot at the end of the show, so we might as well get the hell to it here. But Minnesota Wild had quite simply an awful week of hockey. They played Tuesday at home against the Arizona Coyotes, XL Energy Center. And as I wrote about the next day on zonecoverage.com, the Minnesota Wild held a 3-1 lead going into the third period after goals from Charlie Coyle, Zach Parise, Jason Zucker. And then they give up 3 goals in the final frame to lose 4-3 in regulation to the Kachina jersey-less Arizona Coyotes. But just an absolute meltdown that we've maybe seen once before. The Buffalo game comes to mind, but as I called out on zone coverage the next day, the Minnesota Wild did just about everything wrong that you possibly could to give that game away. And really right off the hop in the third period, the Wild just looked like they were content to just dump the puck and play with the lead, and the Coyotes just took full advantage of that.
Yeah, you know how, and not to say that I've done this before, but when some folks get sick and you fart and it's not really a fart, that's kind of what happened. Yeah,
they sharted.
Yeah, that's exactly what the third period was. I mean, it was just I think they played a little safe or a lot of safe actually, and then by the same token, oddly playing it safe still managed to have some egregious defensive breakdowns. And Devin Dubnyk didn't, wasn't on top of his game and didn't do them any favors either, especially with the game-winning goal. So it was just one of those games. In my recap, I said you just like to forget, but it might come back to haunt you. So especially against a team that isn't a top-flight competition like the Coyotes.
And yeah, the Coyotes were not. They're not great, to be honest. And I think the point to be made was the Wild should have put their foot on the gas and to begin the third period, because the Coyotes, to their credit, very good defensively and in goal this season, but they're not a good offensive hockey team. And all 4 goals in that game came at 5-on-5. The Coyotes going into that game had the fewest 5-on-5 goals in the National Hockey League, and I still think they do. And the Minnesota Wild allowed all 4 goals at even strength in the game to lose, and that's just something you can't do. And they did, and they blow that, and they've got to get it turned around for their next game against a very red hot Columbus team. And as we dive into that game, the Wild again, they get on the board. First, Mikhail Granlund, midway through the first period, but then really from then on out, it was the Columbus Blue Jackets show as they put on a good offensive display, and at times in that game, the Minnesota Wild were just kind of bystanders again.
Yeah, no, that was definitely Columbus on full display, and it's kind of interesting watching that team, seeing how talented they are, and as I mentioned in the recap. You gotta wonder how good that team would actually be without Torts. You gotta think that he's, we don't have a whole lot of respect for his coaching prowess. So you gotta wonder how good they would actually be without him there, because they've got a lot of talent on that team, and it really came through on Thursday. And the Wild looked like they had a little bit of an emotional hangover from that Tuesday night letdown, and kind of played like it.
When you gotta wonder how. I mean, this is really it for Columbus. Like, this is kind of a ride or die season for them, because Bobrovsky and Panarin are just, good as gone.
Yep.
So they're playing really well, and Cam Atkinson just playing out of his mind right now. And he had a goal to get the Blue Jackets the lead that they never gave up. But Cam Atkinson has I forget what it was. It was 8 goals in the previous 8 or 9 games leading up to that, and just absolutely an insane stretch for him. And again, we saw some not particularly great goaltending from Devin Dubnyk, and we're going to come back to him later, but really just an all-around disappointing performance. And now you've lost 2 in a row, and you've seen your lead in the second place in the Central Division just slip to absolutely nothing, as the Colorado Avalanche have caught, and as we're going to get into later as well, have passed the Minnesota Wild, and now they're quickly sinking here in the standings.
Yeah, I don't think it's time to start talking about swoon necessarily, but it's it's worth consideration because the team play and the goaltending has been that poor.
Yep, correct. And then lastly, here in the past week, Minnesota, they return home before they head out back on the road for, I think it's like 4 games, but they host the, oh hell, who did they host?
But talking about Saturday?
Bueller. Yes, the Toronto
Leafs.
Maple Leafs. Sorry, I had a either a brain cramp or it's all the drugs took hold of me here. But no, the Wild host the Toronto Maple Leafs, who had just recently, earlier in the day, signed William Nylander after one of the most useless holdouts in the, I guess not holdout, but standoffs in recent memory between team and player. But Willie Nylander signing for a very nice AAV of $6.9 million over 6 seasons.
Nice.
But anyway, the Wild host the Maple Leafs, and as I pointed out in our pregame video prior to the game, the Maple Leafs really, they look to be a complete hockey team. Full disclosure, I haven't seen a whole lot of Toronto this year, so this was really my first kind of full-on game experience with them. Maple Leafs win 5-3 over the Minnesota Wild, as they really just got a lot of fortunate goals. 2 deflections off of Nick Seeler, or as the soccer fan in me would call them, own goals, as Ben would love to point out here. And then the Matthews goal was just an absolute laser. Nobody stopped that. And as Bruce Boudreau pointed out, just fluke goals, and then you've got one that just the goaltender's not stopping, and then the empty net goal. And it was a game that the Wild played better than the Toronto Maple Leafs, but the result didn't show as such. And then, of course, you have Tyler Ennis getting one of those own goals, just to throw a little more salt in the wound there. But Wild come out of that losers 3 in a row, and now they are suddenly kind of teetering on crisis mode. But what did you think or feel about the Toronto game?
Well, it was one of those games where you really could kind of post it as a moral victory, even though it wasn't an actual victory, because I thought they played really well, and I thought they bounced back from not playing so well in the previous 4 periods, I guess, in the week. But I thought they played really well, and to your point, Toronto is a very good team, and they have a little bit of balance, but if they're weak anywhere, it's probably in their defense. Their goaltending has been phenomenal. Frederik Andersen was absolute lights out last night, but the Wild really took advantage. I mean, they put up 40-some shots on Andersen, and he was very much up to the task. And on the opposite side, it felt like they limited chances really well. Dubnyk had to make a couple of really big saves, but then the goals that went in, as you mentioned, were kind of, except for the Matthews goal, all on the very fluky side. So, as bad as this team has been, or not bad, but as inconsistent and maybe on the downward plane a little bit as this team has been, you felt like they, from a process standpoint, turned it around last night on Saturday. So you got to feel good about what they brought to that game. Certainly not the result that anybody wanted, but and I think they were very aware of that. A lot of the quotes from the team after the game were, if we play like that every night, we're going to win a lot of games. And they're absolutely right. And it's disappointing that the losing streak continues, but if you're going to lose, at least be to a good team and at least look really good while doing it.
Mike Babcock gave the Wild some good credit after the game when he said that the Leafs should play them 20 times going into the playoffs, just to understand how heavy and how hard it is. Because he cited that the Leafs are obviously a fun team to watch, but just because you're a fun team doesn't mean you get to play a long time in the spring. So he kind of cited the Wild as a good litmus test for the Leafs to kind of, say, hey, you need to play a little bit more like this in addition to, how you have been to win in the playoffs when it really matters most for them. But I found that fascinating. And then as we'll come back to a little later, another little interesting interesting quote from the opposite head coach in the post game presser, but that's for a later segment. So Ben, now we're into the December schedule here for the Minnesota Wild, and you know, first and foremost, Devan Dubnyk, a awful November for the Minnesota Wild. In 10 games, he compiled a 4-5 record, and then a save percentage of .882 in the month of November. And I went back and I looked at Devan Dubnyk's monthly splits, and his .882 save percentage is the lowest save percentage in a full month, not counting the month of April with just the 3 or 4 games every year. But it's the lowest monthly save percentage he's ever had with the Minnesota Wild, and not good by any stretch of the imagination, as the Wild kind of really floundered here in the last half of the month after a really good start to the month with that 7-game road trip. But should we really be concerned about Devan Dubnyk, or do we just trust that at some point he does get the ship righted here?
I think that we do. I think that we trust that he's going to get it back at some point, because we've always seen this out of him. Last season, just kind of take a quick look here. Oh, there we are. All right, so he was .905 in October last year. Save percentage is pretty rough. Then up to .916 in November, .940 in December. There's so many examples of this. I can look up another one here. So 2016, 2017, probably the same thing. Let's see. So October, March, .889 save percentage. But, in the month of November and December, .942, .934. It's just, he has hot and cold months all over the place. There isn't really any rhyme or reason to it, and that's maybe a little bit concerning, because it's not like he's a hot early, cold late, or cold early, hot late kind of goalie. It's literally almost on a month-by-month basis. So it's really tough to peg. Let's see here. February 2016, 900 save percentage. March 2016, 927. It's just these fluctuations are all over the place, and they always have been for him. And it just kind of is what it is with him at this point. Like, that's just kind of who he is as a goaltender. He has hot streaks, he has cold streaks. And, I think we also need to recognize that the team is a part of that too. And nobody even knew that Dubnyk was struggling until probably the last week of November. I wasn't even aware of it until you posted the stat on the rough November that he had been having, because the games that they lost, it didn't look like they were supposed to win them. It didn't look like Dubnyk cost them games. I don't think he's cost them very many games. You put anybody else in net on Thursday night against Columbus, and they probably lose that game. You can make an argument for Tuesday. I think that third period, Dubnyk had not seen a lot of shots, and as we mentioned, that game-winning goal looked pretty brutal on him. He kind of went for a stack the pads thing when he probably shouldn't have, but I don't think that he's costing them games right now, and the defense is just playing poorly in front of him, and he's not at the top of his game to be that safety net like he was in the month of October. I think that's the difference. Look at last night. Look at Saturday night. What was Dubnyk's save percentage last night? What was it? Let's see, 22 shots, I think.
Yeah, I think so, yep.
So his save percentage was .818 last night. .818. Did he play that poorly? No. No, he didn't. So, it's not to go full on, goalie defense mode as
goalie apologist
as a lot of you are used to me being, but I just think that there's going to be an ebb and flow to him as there's an ebb and flow to the team. And right now the team isn't playing well defensively, and he's not playing well either. He's not stopping a lot of pucks that maybe he would stop otherwise. But on the flip side, I don't think he's allowing a whole lot of really soft goals either. I mean, there's a lot of goals that it seems like the goals he's letting in are at least earned. He's not full on Darcy Kemper mental freakout zone yet. I don't think we're there yet. And I fully expect him to, maybe not go up to a 930, 940 bananas December, but I fully expect him to bounce back. And I think Bruce does too. And that's why we've seen Dubnyk start every game this week. I think if Bruce were really concerned about the way that Dubnyk was playing, if Bob Mason was really concerned about the way that Dubnyk was playing, we would have seen Alex Stalock this week. There's no question about it. I mean, Stalock is playing well enough, as you pointed out last week, that he absolutely could have started any of these games. And I think if they had reservations about Dubnyk, he would have. So I don't know. It's one of those things. You got to let him work out of it. You know, he's still the guy. He's very much the guy. There's no goalie controversy here. And I think you just kind of have to let him play through it and hope that the team can kind of pick him up and play some defense in front of him and give him a chance.
So you mentioned that, Dubnyk hasn't really given up a lot of soft goals here in the last couple games necessarily, but have you noticed maybe anything like positionally with Dubnyk that has been maybe not working for him during this stretch, or that is looking just fine for him too?
Well, it's always a struggle with him, again, with deflections and tipped shots and shots from the point, screens. He's been screened a lot, I feel like, in the last month. And that's something that I've beat the drum on with him almost since his time here, and a theory that I have on him just because of his height, where it's tough for him to see through those. So I think that when things are going poorly for him, I think that he has, he maybe presses a little bit on trying to see through those screens and trying to get through that, that coverage and stuff like that. And also, if your reactions are milliseconds off in the NHL, you're allowing goals versus making great saves. And so if he's the slightest bit off, he doesn't stop some of those deflections. Whereas when he's red hot like he was in October, maybe he's getting a pad on some of those deflected shots from the point. Maybe he's getting, the edge of his blocker on some of those shots that are cross crease passes. But when you're a little bit off, when your game is a little bit off like his is right now, it makes all the difference. I mean, it's literally a game of centimeters or millimeters in the NHL, so it doesn't take much.
And something else I've kind of noticed here is, when Dubnyk gets into maybe that really rough stretch where something is, kind of in his head and he knows he's struggling, is whenever somebody just floats by the crease and, just the slightest breeze, maybe graze him or something, he will complain to the referee. And he really hasn't done that, really at all this year, to his credit. And, maybe that more has to do with the Wild defense, and maybe more particularly that third pair, really keeping people out of his way, out of the net, out of that area. But that's really not something we've seen. So if he's just able to see the puck like he really has been, then, he's probably going to come out of it. But what you said, it's a lot of the defense has been not great at, letting him, one, see the puck, or two, putting him in spots to where he can make, saves easily. And so I have hope that, like you, that he does turn it around. But I am also not afraid to say maybe let's give Al Stalock a start on Tuesday at Vancouver, just to see what happens. And if he wins that, throw him on to the next one. But I don't know, Bruce obviously knows what's best, or at least I like to think he does. So it will be interesting to see how he kind of handles the goaltending kind of moving forward as the Wild go back out on another Western road trip through Canada, where they hit Vancouver Tuesday, Calgary Thursday, and Edmonton on Friday. So and you got 3 winnable games right there. So it will be really interesting to see how Bruce kind of handles the goaltending. And Stalock for sure will start one, since the ladder's on a back-to-back, but will be interesting to see who starts 2 and who starts 1.
Yeah, I think just because that back-to-back is there, I think they roll out Dubnyk again on Tuesday night, and Stalock gets either Thursday or Friday, and that's probably it. If they had more of a traditional week with the Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, I like your idea of giving Stalock Tuesday and then maybe letting him earn a start on Thursday or Saturday. But seeing as how there's a back-to-back already waiting there, Bruce is very, he almost never deviates from, splitting the goalies on those back-to-backs.
Right. Speaking of defensive pairings, Ben, the defensive, structure has not not really been the same since Bruce Boudreau switched up the defensive pairings, throwing Suter with Spurgeon and Dumba with Brodin. Do you have any blazing hot takes on what maybe needs to be done with that moving forward?
Yeah, switch them back. It's pretty straightforward. There was a little bit of talk about this last night on the Twitters during the game. I don't know. I think that Suter and Dumba was a good pair, and maybe they're not the most cohesive unit personality wise, but I think that it kind of works in a very odd couple kind of way. And Spurgeon is basically almost good with anybody. What we've seen with the new pairings is we've seen Dumba and Brodin struggle. Suter and Spurgeon are going to be fine because they're virtually fine with whoever they play with. That's how good those two guys are. But I think when you mix Brodin and Dumba, I think those two are a little bit more volatile. Brodin isn't quite as good at maybe covering Dumba freelancing a little bit more. Dumba is the type to pinch in quite a bit, the type to lead the rush a little bit. And Brodin maybe isn't as well suited to handle that as Suter is. And I think that's kind of been the crux of the issue.
So I looked just to take a look at what kind of how the analytics kind of favored the defensive pairings, and it's really weird to say this, but the Brodin-Dumba pairing is the best puck possession tandem on the Wild in terms of defensive pairings with minimum of 50 minutes this year. They're doing good in that department, but as we've seen a few times here in the last week or so, they've had some pretty egregious defensive lapses that have caused their goals against to go through the roof here. But I did find it interesting that their 59.5% Corsi together was far and away tops on the Wild. So that is something. But I guess I didn't think too terribly of the defense against Toronto.
No,
they
played great.
That gives me cause to say I'd say keep them together and see if they can string together good games on this road trip. Toronto's just an offensive juggernaut, and the fact that the Wild, I thought, played very well defensively with those pairings, maybe seems to give me reason to believe they can turn the corner here without Bruce having to switch back to the old reliable pairs that he's had earlier in the year. But again, to what your point, if he does have to switch back, it's not the end of the world. It just
no.
I guess I would like to see how they do against the young and guns of Vancouver. So
and Edmonton.
Yeah,
that's the bigger test. Yeah,
Ryan Suter still has nightmares about that Connor McDavid goal from their first meeting this year.
Yeah, and to your point, I think that we saw the same thing last year where Brodin and Dumba started off the season together and it didn't go well at all. But then to your point and against my point, I think by mid-season they started to gel a little bit and they started to work together a little bit, and they did get markedly better as the season went on. You cited Corsi. I'd be interested to see what the expected goals kind of look like, because I think they probably do limit shots and get a lot of shots themselves because, it is Matt Dumba after all. But I'd be interested to see what they're allowing as far as, you mentioned those kind of egregious defensive breakdowns that they've had here and there. I wonder how that affects their expected goals number.
Well, just sorting the expected goals here, their expected goals 4.25 would be the second lowest among the five qualifying defensive pairings.
Well, there you go.
So there you go.
Yep.
But so yeah, that I don't know. I stick with it, I guess. That's all I got for that, because I don't know. Don't upset Father Suter over there.
I was gonna say there's probably personalities to work with there. I know Suter. Suter loves him some Jared Spurgeon, And who doesn't? Who could blame him?
Yeah. But Ben, you got any other kind of blazing wild thoughts here before we kind of move on to our other segments here?
No, nothing really. Last night I kind of mentioned that they lost the game against Toronto because they weren't really able to finish, and we had a very memorable wide open net missed by Jason Zucker. We had some other plays where it seemed like they were a half a step off on their passes, and it would have, likely been a goal had they been, that step on with their passes. I think that's also a little bit what's plaguing this team. I think they're just a little bit off on the execution, and stop me if you've heard this in the playoffs before, but they're just not really able to finish as well as you would hope. And I think that's kind of a team-wide problem. When even a guy like Jason Zucker, who has been incredible for this team for the past 2 seasons, when he's having problems finishing, I mean, it's a widespread problem. Granlund too.
Yeah, last thought for me here on the Wild at whole, it was I pointed this out in the Columbus pregame video, but Matt Dumba just needed a point against the Blue Jackets to break the Wild record for consecutive games with a point in team history, as he was at 7, tied with Ryan Suter from 2013, but no points for Matt Dumba against Columbus, so he was not able to break the team record there. But was neat to see Matt Dumba starting to make his mark on the record book, and so obviously many more here to come, because he's got quite the number of goals here already this season, so he'll be sure to make his mark still, and regardless of who he plays on the defensive pair with. So,
right.
Also, have you noticed how teams have started to kind of give him the Ovechkin treatment, where they shadow him on the power play?
No, I hadn't really noticed that, but that's interesting and probably a good idea. I don't know, more teams don't do it in general.
Yeah. So that was kind of an interesting thing, but yeah. All right, we can move on to our Bruce Boudreau quote of the week.
Hi, this is Bruce Boudreau. I don't see how in Toronto that they're calling it, unless it's a guy they just pulled in off the street that hasn't seen hockey before. If I were the fans, I'd be booing even more, because that, they pay good money for this.
If you want it, don't just think you want it. Go out and f***ing want it.
So the quote of the week for the Wild head coach comes from Saturday night's game against the Toronto Maple Leafs, and it's just more of a fascinating moment. Nothing, not necessarily funny, but it wasn't. I don't know. It's just a weird moment, I guess, where Boudreau was answering a question from Russo, and then all of a sudden he just kind of cuts off, and then he just asks a couple of guys in the back to be quiet. And when you hear that, you just kind of turn your head up, like, was he kind of joking? And you look at him when he says it, and he's like dead on serious.
Yeah, he's not joking.
And he was not in the greatest of mood after the game.
It's a good time for a day off, because I think emotionally they might have been a little bit done. Can you be quiet down there? What were you saying, sir? I don't know. I couldn't hear.
Yeah, that was just another interesting moment, and then he had lost his train of thought, and then he kind of threw him under the bus again, and because he said, "I can't remember, I couldn't hear." So takes another jab at the audio guys in the back. So thoughts and prayers to those audio guys.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what the situation was there. Somebody, I don't know. Hopefully nobody's getting fired over it.
Yeah, but I don't know. It stinks when the Wild have kind of losing streaks like this during the week, because Bruce kind of gets a little more. He tends to be a little more serious, so there's not a lot of other great material for quotes.
Sure.
And he really kind of just gives the the cliched hockey quotes.
Yeah, when he gets
So
angry, he doesn't get nearly as fiery, I feel like. It's almost better when they lose one game out of nowhere and he can get a little bit snarky sometimes, That's a lot of fun. And obviously when they're going well and he can be kind of goofy, that's a lot of fun too. But you're right. When they're in the midst of a losing streak like this, like he's just flat pissed. There's no other way to put it. He's just kind of pissed off and doesn't want to talk to anybody. And yeah, he just starts flipping through his book of hockey cliches, and that's all you get.
Yeah. So there you go. So there was your Bruce Boudreau quote of the week. Ben, we can move on to our Kirill watch.
Kaprizov across for Gusev. Kaprizov shoots. He scores! He scores! The Russians are golden in South Korea.
I should probably have Kirill Kaprizov's stats up in front of me here, but I don't. Again, I'm just going to blame that on the drugs here. But
yeah,
as I
that's an easy out.
Quickly try to scramble here to pull up his stats.
But it appeared he only played in one game this week, and I don't know. I didn't look at the schedule for CSKA Moscow, but it looks like he played in one game and got a point. So
I think he had a goal.
Yeah.
Because I quote tweeted it from the podcast Twitter account.
So
But,
I don't know if they had other games and he didn't play in them, but he only played one game. So at least he scored in said game.
Right. And on the season, Kirill Kaprizov with CSKA is 32 games, 15 goals, 10 assists. And he's doing quite well for himself over there. As we continue to kind of keep an eye on him, and was fully hope that he makes the trek over to the United States in 2020. Ben, was there another prospect you wanted to highlight?
Sure, and it's a fellow Russian. It's a countryman. One Alexander Kovanov was a third-round pick of the Wild this past summer. One of those kind of high-ceiling picks that we really liked. They made a bevy of picks in the third round, and I think they were pretty universally applauded. Kovanov was certainly one of them, but he's playing for the Moncton Wildcats up in the Q, which is also another rarity for the Wild to pick a player out of the Q, the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. He has 39 points in 29 games, which is pretty outstanding. And the Q is it's junior, so it's an offensive environment, but it's not quite the offensive environment that the OHL is. So to have well over, you're talking 1.25 points per game up in the Q. That's a pretty solid season. 18 goals, 21 assists. Alexander Kovanov, a young Russian that made the trek over here to play in Canadian juniors to improve his draft stock. I think that's going to be something we might see a lot more of. It's certainly, we saw the same thing with Dmitry Sokolov, where these kids realize if they go the Kirill Kaprizov route, there's a lot of intrigue around them. There's a lot of unknowns around them. And then they end up being super, super talented and only being picked in the fifth round, like Kirill Kaprizov. But if they play in, Canadian or American juniors, they can really kind of prove themselves, and they can really, improve their draft stock and get a lot more eyeballs, a lot more professional looks on their game. So that's what Mr. Kovanov did, and he's making good with it. And it'll be interesting to see if he, how long he sticks around in the Q, or if he makes the jump to the Wild next season or the season after.
Yeah. Oh, good. Good to see the Wild have a player in the Q. They, I don't know. It's weird. A
Russian player in the Q, no less.
Yeah, and they just between Russians or Canadians and recent drafts, it feels like the Wild have stayed far away from those. So it's either Americans or the Swedes or Finlands. Not that that's a bad thing. It just
it definitely was an archetype for a long time. I think Matt Dumba was the one Canadian they picked in the first round for out of a 10-year stretch or something like that, or an 8-year stretch or something. It was almost absurd.
After Colton Gillies.
Well, I can understand being a little gun shy after some of the first round picks, but that was, late Risebrow, early Fletcher era. So it's like, I mean, you gotta. I mean, how do you not pick players from Canada on purpose? Like that's a thing,
Right.
you know?
Good old Colton Gillies. What a time to be alive. It'll be something for my flashback or my Throwback Thursday segment that I do on Zone Coverage. Find a Colton Gillies highlight. Did you enjoy the 5 power play goals that I highlighted on Thursday? Not only could I not believe the Wild have actually done that in a hockey game because I never remembered their power play to ever be that good.
Right.
They've done it 3 times in their history. 3.
Wow. That's
all
crazy.
of them in the Jacques Lemaire era, which is even more egregious.
Well, but I think that's the only time that team actually scored was on the power play because there wasn't a lot of scoring to be had 5-on-5. So, that was when guys like Gaborik and Ralston kind of feasted a little bit because that was the only time where they were able to actually play offense without the threat of 40 lashes.
And this week was a good one. It featured a Craig Weller highlight. There was a Ryan Suter in the Nashville blue uniforms with Shea Weber. Mikko Koivu had a breakaway goal, which was incredible. It was good. So check that out because I enjoy that segment. It's fun to dig into the archives and find fun stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But anyway, onward and forward, Ben, we can move over to our Central Intelligence report.
Central Intelligence.
Yeah, I've been scoreboard watching since opening night. So I don't know if that counts or anything, but I think hockey players are hockey players, and they want to see where they are, and they know how close everything is. They know that every game is vital.
And as I alluded to earlier on the show, the Central Division starting to stack up again, especially in the middle, as the Minnesota Wild have floated on down from their second place position, which they held for quite a bit of time here, many weeks here this season. They are now 5th in the Central Division and holders of the last wild card spot in the Western Conference with 30 points, as their losing skid here really has taken them down in the standings. But the Nashville Predators still holding in first place with 37 points. They hold an 18-8-1 record, coming off a 5-2 win over the Chicago Blackhawks on Saturday evening. But then the red-hot Colorado Avalanche, who have won 8 out of their last 10, and they have not lost in regulation in their last 10 games. Sheesh. So those 2 losses have just come in overtime. But they are now 35 points, just 2 off of Nashville. And the Avs also have a game in hand. So, the Avs win the next game and Nashville doesn't play, then they are tied.
Yeah.
Go figure. But then the Winnipeg Jets at 32 points. They've won their last 2 hockey games here as Patrick Laine continues to light up the back of the net. I wonder if at this point, whenever Patrick Laine scores, the goal just explodes like an NHL open ice. That's kind of what it feels like right now.
Yeah.
And then the Dallas Stars at 31 points. They've also won 2 in a row. They have leaped over the Minnesota Wild. And then Minnesota Wild with 30 points. And then they are followed by Chicago Blackhawks, 23 points. St. Louis Blues, 21 points. So the Wild not in any danger of being jumped over by any Central teams, but there's a couple of Pacific teams, Vegas 29, Edmonton 28, who are right on the Wild's tail for that last wild card spot. So Wild need to pull it together here pretty quickly in the standings here, especially considering their games this week against Vancouver, Edmonton, and Calgary.
Yeah, and they do have 2 games in hand against Vegas, but as you mentioned, it was a quick fall from second in the division to that final wild card spot. So they definitely need to make hay because as it ends right now, you're looking at facing Nashville in the first round of the playoffs, and that's not ideal for anybody.
Right. think what's just impressive is just Colorado just shooting up the standings here. And again, these guys they're being led by one line right now.
Right.
Mikko Rantanen has 43 points, Nathan MacKinnon has 41 points, and Landeskog at 28 points. Like, that line is absolutely on fire.
That's bonkers.
And you can't stop them, and they're just pulling the Avalanche to wins night and night again. And let's see, I'm just quick scanning the notes on the Avalanche just to kind of further exemplify how good they've been. MacKinnon had 23 points in November. That's just absolutely ridiculous. Rantanen had 22 points in November. And Rantanen's 43 points leads the NHL in points. So imagine that. Not the right Mikko to be lighting the lamp.
Yeah.
So that's your Central Intelligence report. And last but most certainly not the least amount of time for a segment will be had on jerseys this week.
Here to start the third period. What team is this? It's not Team USA. Oh, yes, it is. They've got on new uniforms. They're wearing the logo of the Duck. I've never seen this before.
And Ben, we obviously falling in line with the last couple of weeks, but we are at the 90s for our best and worst jerseys of the decade. And as we talked last night and doing some show prep, we had to kind of expand our the amount of jerseys we're going to highlight for this particular decade because there's a lot of ground to cover.
Yeah, there's we literally could do multiple episodes about this. Like multiple 2-hour episodes about this.
Right. We did discuss an episode unto itself of just 90 jerseys talk, but we did not want to do that, so we're going to try and keep it short here, but we do have a lot to cover. So essentially what we're going to do is we're going to give you 5 of our favorite jerseys that were introduced in the 90s and 5 of our least favorite jerseys that were introduced in the 90s. And Ben, do you want to lead off with one of your worst?
Yeah, we can definitely do that. So it's tough to order these, and you know, I'd pained myself over I didn't pain myself too much over the order, but it was tough to kind of put them in order because there's just, you know, I think it's more of a categorical thing than a order kind of thing. But leading off my worst 5 jerseys, number 5 for me is the Kings redesign, the black and purple with the shield, late in the 90s. I believe it was 98 or 99, and for some reason it just kind of stuck out to me as just like it was such a downgrade from that Gretzky era jersey. You know, it was really the only jersey in their catalog that is bad. I mean, we like the Foreign Blues, we love the Gretzky era. The jerseys they're wearing now, you know, you can make a great argument as to being one of the best they've worn. But this particular design was just bad. I mean, the black and purple just did not work well together, and it just. I know it's kind of a dark horse per your reaction, but I just am not a fan of those jerseys. It's just not good.
Well, I'm not going to say it's terrible, but
yeah,
it's not great, and you're right. They tried essentially what they tried to do is mash together their 2 eras of Foreign Blue and then the Gretzky era. And it's not great.
No.
And I'm not going to say it's bad though either. I didn't think too terribly of it. The crest was an interesting thing. There's maybe a little too much going on there for my taste, but they've kind of rectified that here in recent memory. But all right, I'm a little surprised that was the Kings one you opted with for the worst, one of the worst in this decade.
Oh,
because
there could be more.
Okay, well then my first worst one, and I think you probably have this somewhere on your list, is going to be in the season of, I think it was 95, 96. Yep, when the NHL introduced third jerseys. The Los Angeles Kings they opted for what has now become legend as one of the worst ever, the Burger King jersey that Wayne Gretzky so eloquently wore.
Oh, poor guy. It was such a bad look. Yeah, I do have them on my list. They're actually all the way up at number 2 on my list. I had 2 Kings jerseys on my list, which kind of goes to show how much I liked their old jerseys, and then the great screwing that they did around with their jerseys was so bad.
When again, it looked like they tried to mash a little bit of their history together.
Yeah.
With the form blue and then the black and gray, but the sash essentially that's going on with this jersey, and then the Burger King mascot that's going on. Don't get me wrong, that makes a great shot glass that I have here in my home, but it's just not good. And then the numbers and letters on the back, like, if you look at NHL uniforms, you can barely read that KY and Gretzky on this uniform, and it's not good. So I don't have my jerseys in any particular order, but this one is it's right up there for taking the cake of worst jersey in the 90s.
Yeah, no, definitely, without a doubt.
All right, Ben, what's another one you have as a worst?
The Tampa Bay Lightning also came out with a third jersey in the 90s that and this was a theme. There's a couple of them that kind of went for almost like a painting type thing, where they were looking to like paint a scene almost, and so there was waves and there was lightning, and you were supposed to imagine that you were on some kind of ill-fated ship or something for the Lightning. So that was, they just did way too much with this jersey. It just, I don't even mind the Lightning wearing blue, but there was just so much going on there, and it just looked so forced, and it was so terrible, and definitely 90s in a nutshell.
This looks like something I would make in art class. I'm not an artist by any stretch of the means, but somebody got paid to make that.
I know, right? And there's like rain or like sleet in the background. What the hell is that? Like,
what's going on with the fire on the sleeves here?
That's supposed to be lightning.
Yeah, it looks like fire.
Yeah, no, it does.
This is
That's
why
how
it looks
bad
like
it is.
I made this.
Right. It's like a naturescape on a hockey jersey, but it's a really, really bad naturescape.
Just bad. That was also on my list. So
yeah, absolutely.
And you, I don't know, the Lightning just in general. I didn't really think much of their look until just more, in the last 3-4 years.
Sure.
So whatever. All right, what's your next one on the worst list?
So to kind of tie in with the Lightning, there was another one that was a naturescape. And as much as, and we'll definitely get to this one later, as much as we loved the Kachina Coyote, the Coyotes decided to sever the head of the Kachina Coyote and put it in this bizarre, like, peyote freak-out dream of a jersey that was green, and it just did not. Again, it was exactly like the Lightning uniform, where it was going for a look of the great outdoors, but it looked terrible. Right? Yeah, our producer Justin is recoiling as we speak.
Yeah, this is really bad.
Yeah, it's really bad.
Space Coyote.
I know.
That's exactly what it is. Space Coyote.
Yeah, it is like, it's as much as I like the direction of the Kachina Coyote and that black jersey, that green jersey just needs to be fired into the sun.
Well, that was also on my list.
Yeah, I'm sure it was.
I don't know. I didn't want to put it on there, but I ended up having to, just because I think if you would take the moon and the cactus away, then I think it probably falls off the list. It's still up there, but just all the scenery,
the cacti,
the scenery going on. Yeah, just really, it's like, again, it goes back to the Tampa Bay jersey. It's like, was somebody just trying to make this an art class? Like, there's, there's too much scenery going on hockey uniforms here,
Right.
and this one probably misses the cut if a couple other jerseys that we saw come to light but never actually got put into production
Yes.
had come out.
The Blues.
Because the honorable mentions of this era are going to be the St. Louis Blues and their
Yes.
trumpets,
Yeah.
and then the Philadelphia Flyers teal jerseys that
Yes.
never came to fruition.
So gross.
But
Thank God they never made those jerseys.
yeah, so all right, I'm gonna take one here. So the fourth I have on my list of 5 is probably one that's near and dear to your heart, and that's going to be the Gortman's Fisherman, which is making a
Giles.
comeback here.
What are you doing?
Yep, I'm sorry, I have to. But again, this looks like something that I would have made in art class.
Yeah.
With the uniform, with the wavy lines, and they're trying to make some scenery. It looks like, and
Yeah.
then the Gortman's Fisherman mascot is just no. And then the numbers on the back and the nameplate, it's all crooked. It's
so
all bad.
bad.
It's so. And then there's teal in there. Then there's your cherry on top. The teal. Just get out of here with your teal.
Yeah, it was so weird, like how every team, and not even just in the NHL, this happened in the NBA too, where teams just fell over each other trying to incorporate teal into their uniforms. Like it was some kind of, crazy gold rush for the color teal somewhere around 1995 or so. And it was bizarre to me how much teams like bent over backwards to incorporate that freaking color into their uniforms. It was so weird.
I just imagine Gary Bettman just sitting in NHL headquarters just going, more teal, more teal.
Well, and so this isn't a jersey that I have on either one of my lists, but I think the Sharks did a pretty good job. Like, they made teal theirs. They owned it. They made it a color that they've featured for a long time, and it's really stood the test of time. I mean, they're still rocking teal to this day, and it doesn't look horribly dated, and that's credit to them. But why every other freaking team in the NHL decided that was a good idea, I'll never understand.
I think it maybe has to do with the Sharks, where it was a popular thing right out of the gate, so it was probably one of the things, because the NHL is such a copycat league.
I know.
Everyone's got to jump on that train. So
what I think the Ducks shade of jade was probably semi-close to, and that was a jersey that sold like hotcakes. So I think that there was a lot of copying those two California teams that made good on that shade of green, and the rest of the country just should have kept their nose out of it.
So Ben, what's closing out your worst?
So
list
it's
here?
a little bit of a wild card, but it's a jersey that I see, and for some reason I just cringe. It's the Canucks third jersey from the 90s. That was that weird like red and black. They didn't work with gradient at all like the later ones, but I love the black flying skate jersey, but that red jersey, for some reason, it just, I don't know what it is, the fact that it's two-tone or what, but it just looks hideous to me. I don't understand. I don't know. I don't even fully know why I hate it so much, but I just see it and I'm like, oh my God, that jersey is effing hideous.
Yeah. You're not wrong with that. And I still get like the gold check mark on it. And I had that on my list, but since you had it as well, just for the sake of making it a little different, I'm going to switch my last pick here for worst. And I'm going to roll with the 95 through 98 Calgary Flames uniforms. That was between that and the Canucks on my list, and I went with the Canucks, but since you did, I'll go with the Flames here. And if you take away the diagonal stripes under the crest at the front of the jersey, that just I don't get what's going on here. Maybe it's not a terrible look, but the fact that this thing is there, it's bad. It's so bad.
That was
Why?
another thing.
Especially considering what the Calgary Flames changed from,
Oh, I know.
mind you.
Yeah, beautiful jerseys that they just absolutely obliterated.
And then they further add insult to injury later in the decade when they give us the flaming horse. But
So I think I might have mentioned this before, but up until about a year ago, I swore that was a dragon. I absolutely thought 100% that was a dragon. Just because it's not really decipherable as a horse. It's from head on. It's really goofy. I don't know. Yeah, but that diagonal line, I think that's one of the things that the 90s is underrated on hockey jerseys is they put diagonal lines everywhere.
diagonal everything.
It was bizarre. Like the Ducks did it and it looked, pretty good. And then the Blues did it and it was like, and then like everybody did it. And that's where that weird, like diagonal pedestal came for the Flames crest. I don't understand how that happened.
Yeah. Nope. So that's that closes out my my worst list, Ben. So let's quickly move over to the best of the 90s list. What leads off for you?
Well, and I'm not going to say this is a great jersey by any stretch, but it's a jersey that's near and dear to my heart. I really enjoy the Buffalo Sabres redesigned jerseys in the 90s. The
Yes.
black with the buffalo head. Maybe it's Dominik Hasek alone. That could very well be it. He's one of my favorite players of all time. But I just think it was kind of a fun look. Like it was very 90s. You've got a mean, sneering animal, which nothing says 1990s like a mean, sneering animal. But I think they actually the striping was a little bit odd, but it wasn't awful, and it kind of turned out okay. Like it was a decent look.
Yep. I did have that on my list as well.
Oh,
I
nice.
thought it was a good look. I thought it was an extremely lateral move when they moved
Yes.
away from that in 2006 when they went with the Buffa Slug.
That wasn't lateral. Anything with the Buffa Slug, I mean, we'll talk about that next week. But oh my god!
And now presently, they've gone back to kind of more of an older school kind
Yeah.
of a look. But this was a good look, and the Hasek era was, it was unique to just kind of his time there.
Yeah,
but
very much.
I really enjoyed this look as well. I thought it was maybe a perfect encapsulation of what the 90s maybe should have looked like.
Yeah.
But yeah, that one was also on my list, so I'll kind of go along and lead with that as well on my top 5. But I did enjoy that, and even their subsequent third jersey, which didn't get introduced till like 2000, from that
the red
I
one?
enjoyed as well. So
The red one wasn't bad. It was okay.
all right, what's next on your best list?
Well, we talked about it earlier, how much we love the Kachina Coyote and how glad we are to have that finally back as an official jersey this season. It was 1996, I believe, the Jets moved. And it's just a great jersey. It's so, it's certainly not anything you would want in a Canadian market or a traditional American market, but it just perfectly encapsulated the American Southwest, I think. And it's so often teams make jerseys that kind of you can't really tell where they're from, or you can't. There's no hint at all to anything about their team, and this jersey was not the case, and that's why I like it so much.
All right, Noah, you get no arguments from me, and in fact, I even said I told you Saturday night during the game that I was switching to be a Coyotes fan, because this way I'm always I always just know the team's going to be crap, so
Yeah.
it just nothing surprises me, but at least I have the Kachina jerseys, which I do have one here in my stash, but I'm gonna go a little bit outside the box here. One of my favorites from the 90s is the Pittsburgh Penguins in I think it was 92, 93.
Really?
They went away from their great look of the Lemieux era
Yeah.
that they've since gone back to, but their black jerseys with the Pittsburgh running diagonally
Yes.
down the front. I thought that was a very, very good jersey, and it kind of flies under the radar when we think of 90s jerseys.
Yeah.
My only maybe moderation to it would be to put the skating penguin on the shoulders in place of just the regular penguin that's on there. But
Yeah.
this is still a very, very good look.
Mhm.
And I just think not many people maybe think of it when they think of it replaced a very good jersey. But I I very much enjoy that one. So that's in my top 5 here of the 90s.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, in the third jersey article that I wrote this summer, I called for Pittsburgh to use those as third jerseys. I think it's time. It's been, I think they mothballed those in 95 or 96.
Yeah, they didn't last long.
Yeah, they didn't, and they ended up going with the Robo Penguin immediately afterwards on
when they had like a weird black and gray match.
Stripes that didn't match. And so anyway, so I do think, when I think of Mario Lemieux and even Jaromir Jagr, I think of that jersey.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And being a little bit younger, not seeing Mario play in the Skating Penguin very much until, they turned Vegas gold on us. I guess maybe that dates me a little bit, but when I think of those two guys, I think of that jersey. And I think it's a good look. And actually something that I pointed out this summer with the third jersey, that's actually kind of a throwback to their first ever jersey. Back when they were baby blue, when they first joined the NHL, they didn't have the Skating Penguin for the first couple of seasons. Their jerseys were Pittsburgh diagonally across the chest in baby blue for their first couple of seasons when they joined the league in 67. So it's a throwback on top of a throwback.
What's next on your best list?
My next one, and you might crucify me for having this so far down the list, but I have the Mighty Ducks of Anaheim.
Like I said, mine are in no particular order. Sure. I'm just kind of reading them off here, but I was saving the Mighty Ducks, as they'll always have a place right up on my heart.
Number one in your hearts.
But you will always get an argument for me about the Anaheim Mighty Ducks having the best jersey from the decade, and it is all entirely bias based from the Disney movies, but especially the white, man. The white, just so good. Yeah. I will. Let's be honest. I'll be buried in my Mighty Ducks jersey.
Yeah, I think and I think in certain situations, and certainly South Park made a lot of fun of this a couple of seasons ago with their member berries, but you can't overdose on nostalgia. But I think a little bit of nostalgia is a good thing, and especially when I think objectively the Mighty Ducks logo was good. The jerseys looked very 90s, the eggplant and jade and the diagonal lines. That, those might have been dated eventually. But, even now that Mighty Ducks logo still looks just fine. It doesn't really look dated.
It still holds up.
It still holds up. Yeah, it's great. And I don't know. I think sometimes people lose sight of that. They just think of it as kind of all 90s cannon fodder and I really enjoy those jerseys. They were just absolutely tremendous, and obviously a huge part of a lot of our childhoods.
So I did have the Mighty Ducks on my list. It was the first thing I wrote down when I thought of best jerseys from the 90s.
Yeah.
But another one on my list from the 90s, of my personal favorite is, you might have this one as well, the New York Rangers, the Liberty jersey.
Yes.
Which was they went with a darker navy blue from their regular blue and reds, and then they put the Statue of Liberty head as the crest, and it's just a very good, solid jersey. And they didn't try to do anything fancy with it. They really didn't 90s this jersey, and I'm still shocked that they haven't really returned to this, because it still stands.
Yeah.
A lot of jerseys from the 90s have aged horribly.
Yeah.
This is one that did not.
Right. No, I absolutely agree. They were at the top of my list, and this jersey I loved so much. Even as a young Wild fan, I went out and bought this jersey, I believe, with my own money when I was a kid, and recently actually have rescued it from my mom's house. Luckily, it was still intact, so now I just got to go on some kind of killer weight loss plan to squeeze into a youth medium jersey now. So we'll see how that goes.
Get at it.
Yep. The ends justify the means.
Be like me. I've hit the diet train here myself with the Christmas season rapidly approaching. So
that will happen.
And then the last one on my list of jerseys that are interesting, I kind of went again a little bit outside the box, and I looked at a team that made a kind of a color scheme switch in general which was the New Jersey Devils. And I pointed them out last week as not being a good look with the red and green.
Right.
So they dumped the green in favor of black. So you have a black and red look. And this really has held up for, the last almost 30 years now.
Yeah.
And it remains a very underrated, solid look.
Yeah, no, it really has. And it's really timeless. And, switching from green to black, I think, was just an absolute, must have kind of stroke of genius or correction of an error, however you want to see it. But yeah, I thought about those as well. They were very good jerseys, and that jersey, that logo and jersey was just made timeless when they switched to black.
So that was the last one on my list. Did you have any left, or did you?
Yeah, I
get all
did
yours
actually.
as well?
I had one more, and it was the jersey. We were talking about wearing jerseys today, and then when you got whatever tuberculosis you have right now, I didn't wear the jersey into the studio, but I was going to wear my 1996 John Van Beesbrook Florida Panthers jersey, because that is a jersey maybe not the best of the 90s, but it was a jersey that I really liked. Again, near and dear to my heart because of the goalie that wore it, but kind of a jersey that almost changed the game a little bit. They really kind of hit the ground running with the ferocious animal thing. They went a little over the top with it, but another jersey that absolutely sold like hotcakes. Every other kid on the block had one of those jerseys, and they were a good looking jersey. And I really dig the crossed palm tree with the hockey stick shoulder patch. I think it all kind of worked. It kind of worked for where they were at. It made sense because similar, in the same vein as the Coyotes, the Kachina Coyote. I think this jersey worked for a South Florida that wasn't really all that familiar with hockey.
Yeah, no, you get no arguments from me. That was a pretty good look, and I think the Minnesota Wild have a beat writer who will probably give you a vote of confidence on that as well. So
sure.
But so yeah, that was very, very briefly. I think everyone should give us a round of applause for keeping that one short, because we could have gone on for a very long time.
Well, was that like 20 minutes, half an hour right there?
Yeah, probably.
That's absolutely amazing. We only talked about it for 20 minutes or half an hour.
Yeah, we kept it as short as we possibly could, and it's a good place to end this show here for the week. Ben, any last thoughts before we quickly check out?
Geez. No, I got nothing. A little bit glad that I'm more of an NHL fan. I don't have to deal with the crap that NFL fans deal with. The Kareem Hunt situation, and the Reuben Foster situation. And I don't know how far I want to go back on this, but I could probably go back for a couple of months. But just kind of glad that we don't really deal with that in our sport. Like the biggest drama in our sport is William Nylander not signing until the deadline. You know what I mean? Like that's and Tom Wilson being a douchebag.
I was going to say the biggest drama is Tom Wilson.
Tom Wilson headhunting all the time and getting away with it.
Yeah, it just I don't know. It's kind of a dark area. I'm not gonna put too many words into it, but yeah, you're right there, and yeah. So final thought for me is I don't know. I don't have any.
Great final thought, Giles.
Yeah, the drugs are taking
the
hold
coding's
here,
got them.
I don't know. Yeah, that was a terrible last thought. There's nothing. We're
keeping
nothing
all
there.
of this. We're keeping all of it.
I have an old roommate who will back me up on that when I say there's nothing up in my head right now. So
yeah, okay, I'm sure
we can probably call it there. Thank you to Justin for producing us here on this otherwise fine afternoon. Also, I forgot to plug this at the beginning of the show because I didn't write it down, but zonecoverage.com/subscribe. Punch in the promo code GATG20. You can get a year subscription to Zone Coverage for just $20. Makes a great stocking stuffer for that great Minnesota sports fan in your life. Gives you access to not only Ben and myself's content, but the rest of the Zone Coverage family. And using the promo code also helps Giles and the goalie helps keep up the costs of putting our otherwise fine production together. So do check that out. Follow Ben and I on Twitter at Ben Remington, at Giles Farrell. Zone Coverage on Twitter at Zone Coverage MN. Subscribe to the show on iTunes. Drop us an iTunes rating if you do listen via that platform. SoundCloud, Spotify, iHeartRadio, all that fun stuff. And so that will wrap it up for this show, and we will chat with you again next week.
Later.
It's not resiliency. You're making it sound like we're good. That's all. I'm done.